Being number one is hard. Being number one in New York City is hard. Try being the number one real estate agent in NYC. Meet Keyan Sanai, the hardest working rental agent in New York City. We go beyond this journey in real estate, his tips to brand new agents, and his take on the New York Knicks on this episode of Behind the Grind. Guys, welcome to another episode of Behind the Grind. I have a special guest today, the number one rental agent in NYC, Keyan Sanai. This man needs no introduction if you're in the NYC real estate scene, but in LA, everyone else, I want to introduce my man right here. Keyan, welcome to our show, brother. Welcome.
Thank you, man. It's great to be here. It's my first podcast. I don't really do podcasts, but you were so cool, so nice. I was like, all right, screw it.
Well, pleasure to have you. One of the questions I want to ask you, brother, you're killing out there in NYC, the Big Apple. Walk me through like your first year, brother, like when you just got licensed and you were like, you know what, I'm gonna bring my backpack to work. Walk me through that first day, like, you know, behind the scene of when you were ascending to be that agent that you are today.
Oh man, it was. I still think about it all the time. Actually, it was a long time ago, but I got hired, and they hired 3 people at one time, and of those 3 people, I was actually the last person to close their first rental.
Nice.
And I remember I was competing with this other guy who had just been hired. He's not in the business anymore. His name was Joel, and I lost.
Shout out to Joel. Shout out to Joel.
Maybe not. I don't know. But so he basically, there was this listing, I'll never forget. It was 305 East 95th Street, and I had someone who wanted it. His client acted faster. We both knew the guy who was repping the landlord. And I remember I walked in and he had this smug look on his face, and he goes, if you want to make in this business, you got to be faster than that, like that, right? And I was just like, okay, right. But like Warren Buffett says, there is no finish line when you commit to a business, right? Like there's no finish line. So I was pretty upset. I was devastated, actually. I was not going to curse on your podcast. I was like this. So, but I didn't. You didn't know if you were going to. Some of the most exciting times is if you don't know if you're going to make it or not. I still don't know if I'm going to make it. I mean, you're only as good as your last deal. Honestly, it's like I'm up at night going, man, what if I fall off? You know.
Right.
But the first couple of years are rough, and everyone wants to be in real estate, and there's so many different levels of people that are in real estate, right? So many people get their license, and so many people have come to me over the years, and they go, oh, so like you get hired by Douglas Elliman, and then they give you like the listings and the leads, and I was like, what? Like I was like, huh? You know, like, no, they don't give you anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get to use their name and leverage it or whatever, but like that people like, so how do you get your bit? I'm like, years and years and years and of trying and failing. But those first 3 years, I would say, when I didn't know if I was going to make it, I look back on them fondly now. But you know, I was eating so much tuna, I got mercury poisoning, actually, canned tuna. Yeah. So,
Right.
and I would blend 2 cans of tuna, put mustard in it because mustard had no calories because I was trying to stay lean mentally and physically, and eat that for lunch in the office, and people thought it was hummus. I'm like, no, it's tuna.
Is that your
And
version of humble pie, basically, like just humbling yourself to grind, basically that tuna?
yeah, it's just, and then you know, once a week I would get something I really wanted, right? Something to look forward to, and whenever you look at someone who's great at what they do, they got there by some sort of extreme method, right? Whether it's Kobe, or you look at the best actors in the world, they become method actors, etc. They put in their 10,000 hours. Now, in order to get to where you have to be, like, I couldn't put in 10,000 hours and be Kobe, right? You have to have that. But that was, I guess, me putting in my 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
But I really didn't know. I did not know if I was going to make it. And 2 cans of tuna a day, 6 days a week, that's 12 cans. That's not good for you. So I said to my friend, I'm like, hey, my mouth's starting to taste like. And he's like, well, how much? He's like, you look a little yellow. And I'm like, okay, right. So a lot of tuna, a lot of eggs. But if you go to any psychologist or psychiatrist, right, and you were to tell them like Kobe or Tom Brady's regimen and all that, they'd be like, this person's ill, right?
Yeah.
This person's mentally ill. But it's also not something that you can sustain forever,
Right.
right? you just can't do it. It's just impossible. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis, arguably the greatest method actor of our time, he retired kind of early because when he became Lincoln, like he became Lincoln. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was like a yearly commitment. And I think, right, and you look at Tom Brady, and I think recently with Tom Brady, because as someone who's from New York, you went from hating Tom Brady to respecting Tom Brady. Like, you know what, man, I got to just give it, like, he's that good. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but when the Jets signed Aaron Rodgers,
Hmm.
people said, "Well, look at Tom Brady. He still performs." It's like, have you seen the guy's regimen? He's going to bed at 8:30.
Right.
He's working with a psychologist on how, at the moment of impact, he's going to relax his body. He's not eating sugar. He's not eating grain. He's making use of every single minute of his day just to
Mhm.
be out there and perform at that level. And if you're not doing that as you get older, you're not, as we've seen, you're not going to perform at that level.
Exactly. And you're talking about Brady, one of the greatest players to ever touch the football, being extreme. And you kind of like, would you say you kind of emulated what they did in sports into what you do for your day-to-day business?
Uh, they definitely worked very smart. I would say that at first, and it's still, I mean, like my biggest quote unquote weakness is like I need to work smarter because a lot of me is just like pounding. It was like pounding the pavement, right? Like
Mhm.
if you take out, I remember there was this thing called Rent Hop where you post ads, and between Rent Hop and leads and everything, my close rate my first year I was at a different company. They're no longer around. Was our first 6 months was 38%.
Wow, that's
And when they
impressive.
told me that, I thought it was bad.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, sorry." They're like, "No, no, that's good." Like, usually a good close rate is 18%.
Right.
But it was it was not because I could get somebody. I'm a great salesperson. I will say that if I could pay myself a compliment, I say, "Will I was born to do this."
Hmm.
But even with that, right? Okay, a good close rate. Let's say I was at 38%. If you're taking out 10 clients, you're closing three and a half,
Right.
technically half, right? Whatever. That still feels like okay. So that's still, let's just say, 70% of the time you're failing. People don't like feeling that.
No.
I didn't
No.
like feeling that.
It's probably
I
it's probably because you have the background of playing competitive sports. And for those who don't know, Keyan played well, not professional, but D1.
No, not professional.
Well, almost professional. I mean, I can't
Not
hold a
even
tennis
close.
racket,
Not
but
even
he
close.
played D1 tennis, which I think, in a sense, kind of groomed you to take, the L's sometimes, right? When you make those phone calls,
Sure.
you
Well, I
know.
wanted to play football.
Yeah.
I did. I did. And I wanted to play football since I was a kid. I'm obsessed with football. I love football. My dad do. My dad was, he came here from Iran and he's like, I'm not going to put you out there. You're going to get crushed. Like, and thank God, by the way, because we go back to that 10,000 hours thing. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I would have got crushed. Right.
Right.
So it's one thing to be, to spread negativity. It's another thing to spread toxic positivity, as I call it. Like, you can't necessarily, if I came into the game, even now at the point I'm at, right, almost 10 years in, it's like, next year my goal is to sell a $50 million apartment, right? I'm not
Right.
being negative when I say, okay, there's levels, right? So it's just not gonna, if it happens next year, awesome, right? But I think you want to be realistic with your goals. And
Right.
most people say, oh, you can achieve, you tell kids they can achieve anything. It's like false. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, you can play the hand that you were dealt to the best of your ability. I mean, I'm barely 5'10" and a half now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How was I going to play football? Right? Am
Yeah.
I Cole Beasley? Right? I'm not Danny Woodhead. Belichick's, I wasn't an exceptional athlete, right?
Right.
Julian Edelman, right? So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Because people will always point to the exception out there. Like, well, Drew Brees was only 5'11". Like, it was Drew
Yeah.
Brees.
It's Drew
He was
Brees.
beating Andy Roddick in tennis in boys 12s. Like, you can,
Right.
but even if you are that talented, typically you still need to put the work in, right? So say,
Right.
okay, I am a great salesperson, but I was still failing 70% of the time as a great salesperson.
Right. And I think, that's a disconnect where I think a lot of the agents, they watch like, the HGTV shows, they'll watch them on Bravo, and they're trying to compare their skills, compare these
Sure.
people that on TV, and let's just face it, half the time it's all fake, so
I think
that,
more than half the time from what I've seen,
yeah,
right? I get these emails that's like, come to this open house, we'll be filming for $1 million listing. And it's like, well, like, and then when you watch it on TV, you see all these people looking around in suits. Like, those are just agents that were invited there, right? For a free
right,
glass of champagne. I've never been to one of those. Like, I was, as to quote the new school rappers, like, hey, I was in the trenches. Like, I skipped all the marketing
yeah,
events, the networking events. I skipped all that and was just like, I'm going to pound, the pavement. And it's a lot of taking the subway home at 8:45 at night because people want to see things after work or whatever, and being
Yeah.
like, man, nothing might come of that. I mean, there's nothing less rewarding than taking. I mean, I would take someone out Saturday, show them
Yeah.
5 apartments, take them out Sunday, show them another 3. It's okay. Like, great, we'll be in touch. You never hear from them again. I mean, that makes you want to quit very quickly.
Right. It does. Talk about showing homes in the NYC. Do you do it via subway? Do you need a car? Like, how's that transportation working for you over there?
I mean, if you want to quote unquote, if you have a very like high net worth client, right, for a sale, because I do sales as well, then yeah, you're going to get a car, right,
Yeah.
for the day. But I am a I listen. I hate the subway, but I ride it every day because there's nothing. I mean, so I plan my whole life. You want to talk about extremism
Right.
around this? Like I live pretty much in Koreatown, right? I live like right next to 32nd and Fifth, where Koreatown is. Not because there's a neighborhood around here. There's not. It's just literally a Macy's, and you know what I mean. Like I'm looking at Macy's if I showed you the window, but all the express trains are around here. So
Wow.
even before I did this podcast, I walked out. Uh, I went did my grocery shopping. I had 5:30 showing, so I walk 60 seconds to the Express B train and get to the West Village, West 4th Street in one stop, right? So I can get anywhere quickly from this location. There's no neighborhood here, but it's
Yeah.
like, okay, listen, if I want to be the best, I have to get everywhere quickly.
Jeez.
So while I'm not necessarily roughing it anymore, I used to live in a horrible apartment, but I still need to get everywhere quickly, right? Like that's still my whole mindset, right?
Yeah.
My condo building that we converted to condo that we sell is on 28th. I'm 6 blocks away. I can get there
Yeah.
like that, right? So that's the big thing about New York is people go, oh, I want to do a part time or the weekends. Like, no, you got to be doing it 7 days. I couldn't tell you the last time I went to a brunch. So I work 7 days a week in the quote unquote on season. But my wife made a good point to me the other day. She said, I can never tell when she said, when you're always busy to me. She said,
Yeah.
I can't tell what kind of busy it is, but you're always busy. Sometimes you're busy. I'm busy because it's the peak season for the landlords I represent, the rentals. So
Right.
I'm busy. And then the other times the demand isn't high. So I'm still busy because like the leads that I do have, the people who are reaching out, I'm doing everything I can to get them in the apartment. Right.
Yeah.
So it shifts to different kinds of busy, I would say.
Can you talk about that cliche where they say that agents, you cannot be in a relationship with an agent because this thing is like glued to our face or our hands. I mean, my wife,
Yeah.
she's sitting right here next to me right now on the podcast, and she can contest to that where um our life is revolved around our work, right? But it's how you kind of like categorize it, right? So maybe we can walk us through that. Is that true? Is that
Sure.
could say true?
So she's a psychologist, not mine, but
Right.
but I didn't meet her in therapy. But when I met her
Mhm.
pre-COVID, I basically told her like, "Hey, listen, this is how it is." Right? I was very
Right.
upfront about it. I didn't have like talk about being realistic. Even when we were dating, she'd say, "Hey, what time?" She wouldn't say, "Are you working on Saturday?" She'd say, "What time are you done on Saturday?" So, "Oh, should
Yeah.
be done around 4:30," and we'd have our little routines and rituals or whatever that we do. But she had to come to accept it, and trust me, there's times where she gets annoyed. But look, at the end of the day, uh, when you think about, so I'm a child of my father, like Iranian Revolution, basically half my family's refugees and the whole thing. And when you think about, okay, you're glued to your phone, right? Or
Yeah.
you're doing all this stuff, and then you're like, your uncle Fardine or your dad tells you a story like, oh, we were cleaning industrial boilers when we came here, and you're
Oh
like,
man.
okay, it's just perspective, right? Because
Right.
the rest of the world thinks we're overpaid. Like everybody hates agents, but nobody wants to,
To do
like
what
the
they
outside
do.
world.
Right.
The outside world makes jokes about agents, and I think they're hilarious. Like I don't think
Yeah.
that anything isn't funny, right? Like the
Yeah.
typical white BMW, which is a very Persian thing, but apparently a very real estate agent thing, right?
Yeah.
Leasing a BMW, getting a suit from Macy's. But look, man, if you put it in the right perspective, it's not so bad. That's
Right.
that's how I look at it. Like she says to me, like, "Damn, you really internalize a lot because it's always going nonstop, right?"
Yeah.
But I think if I'm not qualified. This is the only healthy relationship I ever had is my marriage, but I am not qualified to give relationship advice. But I will say that from day one, I was just upfront with her about it,
Yeah.
right? So
Same here,
that was it.
man. Same here, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just like you, I found my relationship through COVID. My wife actually is, like you said, is my therapist, right? And I didn't meet her. I didn't meet her through a psychology room or a
That's
psychology
funny.
room. But
That's
I'm just
funny.
similar to you.
Yeah.
Like they got it. You have to have that support system to thrive in this industry. It really can consume you. You know, at the end of the day. But I want
Oh,
to
it
talk about
consumes me. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
When I close my eyes, I find my brain thinking about like work and like, man, this is so unhealthy, right?
yeah,
But I think it depends on what your goals are, right? A lot of people want to be agents so they can stop being agents, I guess. They
Hey,
want
this
to,
is
yeah. So
true story, man. I mean, this might be TMI, but
no, no, nothing's
this,
TMI.
TMI. So, just the fact, even if dinner or in some instances, my wife got on me. We're getting through having a love session, and I looked at my phone from a deal, and my wife almost divorced me after that.
That's
So,
hilarious. I definitely have checked my email at some not so great times. Are you checking your email right now? But it's
touche.
hard, man. Listen,
It's
when you
hard.
work a commissions based job,
Yep.
and there's 1,000 people behind you,
Right.
right, who would want to do your job, or I try not to think about it, right? It's sort of
Yeah.
like I try and think of it just like every day you're taking it, you're climbing the mountain, you're taking a step. But if you look up, see how far you actually have to climb, you'd be like, no, no, thank you. Right.
Amen to
So
that. Yeah.
one step at a time. And as you get older, life just continues to move faster. But if I would have, if I would have in the beginning said to myself, okay, this is how, this is what I want to do. It's going to take this many years. I would have quit. But I said, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm just going to take this one deal at a time. And if you just like Big Sean says, I'm still waking up like the rent is due. Like as you got to
Yeah.
keep that mindset. It's
Oh, I'm
uh,
glad you
complete.
I'm glad you threw that cliche of some hip hop, man. You talk about in the trenches, real quick, rapid
Oh,
fire.
I am a hip hop historian.
Oh
Like I
man.
that's the, like I actually came here, true story,
Uh-huh.
because I wanted to work in the music industry as a music producer. I got a job finally with the president of sales for Sony. I was his assistant. He fired me after 5 months.
Oh man.
And
Bummer.
that's when I got into real estate.
Is it
So
true?
I owe that
Is it true?
I owe that guy. I owe that guy. Shout out to Darren Stupak, man. I owe that
There's
guy for
Stupak. There
firing
you
me.
go. You
I
fired
owe
the
him.
number one agent in NYC. You did him a favor.
Sure, man. And you know what it was? It was like because I was so eager. My personality, I guess, wasn't cut out for corporate settings. I always wanted to help. Like I'd always like. He had this corner office. I would sit outside of it. I'd hear him on a phone call. I'd be like, "Hey, I heard you on that call." I think he'd be like, "You shouldn't be listening to my calls." I was trying to help him.
Yeah.
I was just always trying to help, and they had no idea what they were doing. They messed up when I was there. It was so long ago. They messed up J. Cole's release badly. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I heard him screaming on the phone, going, "Why are we under? Why do we have lack of inventory in Queens?" I'm like, "Because he went to St. John's. That's why it's sold out there. Like, why would you not ship more records to Queens, man?" Anyway, so that guy started my career, so I owe him one.
Well, talking about Cole, do you rate him in your top five all-time MCs?
All time, no. Listen, rappers and lyricists is different, right? Someone asked me
Yeah.
actually this question the other day in the office. This girl Evelyn said to me, I said, "Well, are we talking about lyricists or are we talking about rappers?"
Yeah. I'm talking
Which
about right
right
now.
because
Let's do a hybrid. Let's do a mix of lyricism and top five. So I would tell you my top three NYC rappers, and I might get
NYC
crucified.
only. Okay, yeah, go
NYC
ahead.
rappers, I'll go Nas, I'll
Okay,
go Biggie, and I'll go Jay, number one.
that's that would pretty much be my list. I mean, people always try and sneak Jada in there, and he didn't have as much of a run as these other
Right.
guys did.
And
Nas is still putting out records with Hit Boy that are good.
yeah, and I would say Jada got bars. I'm not gonna lie about that.
Jada's a top tier lyricist, like in every sense of the way, 100%. But uh, that would be for New York. That would be my list for sure.
Right.
I have an unpopular opinion that Drake is, and people, oh Drake. I said, look, he can rap when he wants to, but people don't realize that the best rappers, Eminem or whoever, they had this 3 album run. You have like three years where you're hot.
Yeah.
Nelly had 3 hot albums. I was in Starbucks the other day and they were playing Ride With Me, and I said to the girl, I said, "Oh," she said, "What is this?" I said, "How old are you?" And she said, "I'm 23." I said, "So you don't know that like in 1999, Nelly was the biggest thing in the
Yeah.
world. He had TRL, Country Grammar on lock every week."
Yeah.
And as you get older, you start to realize that we're all just like a little blip,
Right.
right? Because a 23-year-old doesn't know who Nelly is,
They don't. And even
right?
my daughter does not have a clue who 50 Cent is. Like she doesn't
That's
get
crazy.
excited. me and you'll get excited. We see a Gene t-shirt, or we'll see like a chain, a spinning
Yeah, be
chain
like,
of Young
oh
Buck
yeah,
had.
yeah, yeah.
To them, that's like, who the hell is that, Dad?
So
So,
so you start yeah, so you start to realize, right?
right.
So for the fact that Drake put out his first hit single, "Best I Ever Had" in 2009, and we're still talking about it in 2023. I'm like, look, hip hop is a young man's game.
Yeah,
Longevity is. I mean, Nothing Was the Same dropped 10 years ago yesterday, right? And he
right.
said, "Give it time, we'll see you still around a decade from now." So I really think that he can rap when he wants, and I know that
Yeah,
he's more of an entertainer than anybody else will talk about based on his
right.
background. But I gotta hand it's like a Tom Brady situation. It's like I gotta hand it to the guy. You know
No
what I
one,
mean? He
you
came
know
out in
what?
'09. It's
Yeah.
2023. He's
The
selling out
14,
arenas.
yeah. He has a
You
14-year
got to give
run. Like,
respect where respect's due.
yeah, he has a good 14 years run. Who can actually say that they've been rapping for 14 summers and doing a consistent level? And every album is a great album, right? So you're right.
Sure. I mean, it's peaks and valleys. I mean, Kanye '03 to 13 is the greatest run of all time. But I mean, I can't. I mean, I'm so disappointed on so many levels. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like quality of work. The fact that I mean, when you go on an Alex Jones podcast and Alex Jones says, "Slow down," that's how you know like you've lost it.
yeah.
Um, but I would say college dropout, late registration, graduation, 808s and heartbreak, dark fantasy, watch the throne, Yeezus. That is the best run outside of anything else
I agree.
for
Yeezy's
sure.
probably, as far as like top 10 artists of all time, I'd say Yeezy's probably my top 10. Just the run that he had, and creativity wise, Yeezy's just
Sure.
crazy,
I mean,
bro. With it.
Travis Scott just put out an album, and everyone's like, "Oh, this sounds like Yeezus," and like 5 of the songs were from Yeezus, which came out
Yeah,
10 years ago, right?
right.
So, I mean, look, it is what it is with him. Like, I can't really say I'm a fan. I feel like he is doing everything he possibly can to destroy his legacy.
I could debate that too, man. So talking about, I read somewhere that you actually had a mixtape out. Is that true?
No, that was just that was no, that was no. I worked with rappers, but I was always like I said. I think you got to be rooted in reality. So I produced for
Yeah,
rappers and all that stuff, but I never got in the booth. I wasn't. Come on, man. I'm not that delusional. You know what I mean? But look, a lot of people could say that. Coming from outside of Poughkeepsie, right? I do come from outside of Poughkeepsie. When I was very young. I lost my mom. It was just my father from Iran, and I
yeah,
go to the city with no connections, no nothing, and you become, for the last 5 years, you become the top rental agent at Element. I mean, I wouldn't have, I would have been. I used to call my dad when I first started and say, "Man, if I could just get one exclusive building, like if I could just represent one building, if I could just represent one building, oh my God, right?" And life moves fast, right? A lot of it is, they say, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
mhm,
But at the same time, I've definitely caught some breaks, 100%. And now, when you say, well, how'd you catch those breaks? Well, I work 7 days a week, right? I've never had a sip of alcohol ever, not even in
wow,
college, right? Never had a beer. You work 7 days a week, and then things break your direction every now and then. Maybe they won't, like, right? We don't know. But even the thing about our job that you realize once you start to have success is that it's not like a corporate job where you get promoted to VP and then you have a base salary or whatever. Like, look, I was, number 9 in the company overall GCI last year, which is crazy to me because I'm like, okay, but no one else in the top 10 did that off rentals, right? So you have to think about the volume.
right.
So I'll tell you a great story. 2019, before COVID, it must have been May of 2019. I did $80,000 GCI in a month, right? And it was all rentals. Maybe it was 85,000. I can't remember. But I had done about 16 to 20 deals to get to that number, right? I'm doing $4,000 or $5,000 rentals, some $2,000 rentals, right? Whatever, right? But it adds up. Well, who cares, right? So I walk into this executive sales manager's office, name's Alfred Brennan, and I walk in and I'm like, no big deal, going to be number 1 this month. And that was the first year I was number 1. But they do it monthly and yearly. So I'm like, no big deal. 85. It was like probably the highest UCI of mine at the time. Like, no big deal. Don't want to. And I was being facetious about it because him and I have a good relationship. And he looks at his computer and he goes, "You're not number 1." And I'm
Wow.
like, because I'm like, "Oh, come on, man. Like, I blew it out the water. Like, this is a person, this is a PR for
Yeah.
me. Come on now." And he's like, "No, some guy rented the penthouse at Walker Tower for 92,000 a month."
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, this guy that rented this penthouse. No, think about it. You talk about working smarter, not harder. This guy did
Yeah,
one transaction, one,
yeah,
and he had a higher GCI than me, right?
yeah.
So in real estate, especially no matter where you are in real estate, you always have to factor in just nepotism and just
Right.
connections, right? Like
Right.
you just have to. I'm not saying that this guy got this because of some sort of nepotism, but unlike sports, it doesn't always go to the best performing person.
Right.
And that's probably been the most frustrating thing where it's like, hey, we know that you're number one, but we're going to go with someone else because my sister-in-law's brother, is married. And you're like, okay, right? So you see
Yeah.
a lot of things go a certain way. And I actually worked at a country club, and you see sort of like that circle, right?
Yeah.
And that's why people say, well, do you ever, they go, I love the question. Do you ever want to just do sales? Yeah, well, I do sales. I do a couple sales a year, right? I've done $4 or $5 million sales. And do you ever just want to do sales? I go, no, I'm making less money on purpose. You know what I mean? But you got to put the time in. You got to
Right.
crawl before you can walk. You got to walk before you can run. So
Yeah.
at 33, I'm like, okay, listen, if I'm doing $10 million sales by the time I'm 37, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of brokers, especially, oh, man, I don't do rentals. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For me, it was necessity. I didn't have the option to be like, I don't do rentals. I'm going to try and do some big sales. We'll see what happens. Like rent was due. I didn't know what to do. Right. So,
Yeah.
and now people will come to you and go, well, do you do sales too? Yeah. Sales are easier, believe it
Yeah.
or not. Right.
It's
I've
crazy.
shown a $4,000 rental 3 times and made no money. I've shown a $3 million sale 3 times and made a lot of money. Like
Wow.
once. So I tell people, like, yo, rentals are harder. Right.
Yeah.
Because the stakes for that person are give or take the same, right? When
Yeah.
I'm not wearing a suit right now. I got poured on, but when you take someone out and their budget is $2,000
Hmm.
for a rental, I wear a suit. People would clown me. They would, right? Maybe not to my face all the time. They'd be like, what are you wearing a suit for a $2,000 rental for? Because in New York, by the way, $2,000 is a lot of money. That's
Yeah.
never lost on me. That's
Yeah.
24 grand a year, right?
Right.
In New York, you have to make at least 80 grand to qualify for a
Jeez.
$2,000 rental, right? You have to make
Yeah.
40 times the monthly rent. I'm like, well, look, this is this person's biggest financial decision. I need them to think that, or at least know that I'm taking them seriously, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of like I used to lie, right? I wouldn't lie about the apartment, but I'd say they'd be like, "Oh wow, you got a suit on for $2,000 rental." I'd be like, "Oh, I have an open house for this sales listing later," and they'd be like, "Well, how much is it?" I would make, 8 million, 8.5, because you wanted them to think that you had other stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
didn't want them to think like, "Yo, I need you to rent this apartment." So I was always wear a suit regardless of the price point.
Love that. I love that. It's like it's always that cliche again, fake it till you make it. Hey, I'm guilty of that, man. I remember when I got into real estate, I drove a bucket. I was ashamed of it. I parked it like maybe a mile down from my open house, and it was like, "Where's your car?" I got dropped off in an Uber. It's like
Yeah, I
you
took an
got
Uber. But
an
look,
Uber.
I think at the end of the day, you want someone who stays motivated, who drives
Right.
a but like I hate to say it's like even when you pitch someone, right? And like, well, we're gonna
Yeah.
go with so and so. And it's like, look, so and so is, most people get complacent,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, okay, you're gonna go with this person. And I hope that I never achieve this point. You're gonna go with this person, they're gonna hand it off to someone else.
Yeah.
Right? And they're going to use and that's branding and that's scaling. But the hardest thing to do, like the reason I don't have a full-fledged team is because it's hard to scale with quality.
Right.
Always. It's all because they always say if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. Every restaurant that I've ever liked that scaled as a chain has started to suck. Like when there was 6 Shake Shacks in New
Yeah.
York, it was like a religious experience. It was life-changing. My cousin Seth took me, I must have been 14, and I was like, holy shit. Right? Chipotle in high school and college was
Yeah.
so good. I know you're from the West Coast and you guys would never eat that because you have the best, the best of that stuff in the world. But as Chipotle scaled, it started to suck. I haven't been there in years. The last time I ate it, I was like,
Yeah.
this is terrible, right? So it's always hard to scale and keep the quality. But usually by that point, a business person doesn't care because they have the name.
Right.
And now both of those restaurants have become like McDonald's in regard to when someone says, "Oh, you should go to Shake Shack, but don't go to the one in Grand Central because it's not good. Go to the one on the Upper West Side, but don't go to the one in Mass." It's like it's the same thing. How is it different, right?
Right.
So it's just I think you'd want someone who drove a bucket, or you want someone who knows what they're doing, who's refined and polished, but you want someone who's hungry.
Right. So what kind of advice would you give to a kid who's going to a listing presentation? He's going against someone like a Ryan Serhant, for example. right? What advice would you give to them, to that kid who's going against basically Goliath?
I think that the worst thing you could do in any situation is say anything negative about, like I tell people this with apartments, right? Like I've gone on tours and shown tours, and people say, "Oh, well, we're also going to look at the Montaigne or something." And I'll say, in my mind, I'm like, "That apartment sucks." So I'm like, "Okay," and then I'll just highlight the positives that the apartment that I'm showing has that that apartment doesn't, right?
Mhm.
And this will vary, right? But if I was going up, let's just say against Ryan Sir, and I'd say, "Hey, look, Scott, I have 0 books out, right? I have 0 shows.
Yeah.
Okay. I am an expert at what I do. Okay. The numbers don't lie. Yet at the same time, I have not reached the level where I'm complacent or careless or will be handing this off to someone, right? If you're hiring me, let's say it's for a $60,000 rental,
Mhm.
I will be doing all the showings myself. You're getting me, right? You're not getting this scaled version of my brand, so to speak, right?
Right.
And unfortunate, and can he say that? Can he say, "Yeah, I'm going to show the apartment myself"? No, of
No,
course not.
not at all.
Right? So if you're signing with them, you're just signing with him for the fame.
Hmm. Agreed.
I actually, it's funny. I mean, it's listen. I think that Ryan is a genius in
Right.
regards to, is it regard or regards? I don't know. I was a communications major. I think Ryan is a genius in regard to the marketing and the branding. But like
Right.
knowing what I know, if I had to sell my apartment or something, I know he's going to pass up someone, right? But I
Right.
saw the power of it when I brought a buyer to his listing in Dumbo. We actually ended up closing on that apartment. It was actually like 4.1 million. This must have been
Hmm.
2018. When I
Wow.
got there early and the owner was still home, and she said, "Oh, do you know our broker? He's on Brian, on $1 million listing." Like she was so excited to tell me that. And
Yeah.
I was like, I want to be like, "Listen, lady, Ryan Serhant ain't showing up." And he didn't. He
Yeah.
sent some chick, right? Who's,
Yeah.
like, "Listen, lady, he ain't coming," right? Like he
Yeah.
shows up for the $60 million listings, right? And
Yeah.
he's jumping out of a helicopter while writing a book while doing a renovation show. It's like, what does that guy have time to sleep, let alone show apartments, right?
Right.
So I think you kind of want to find that person. That is exactly how I'd position myself, or exactly how I'd position agents. Say,
Yeah.
"Hey, this isn't my first rodeo, but you're going to get me. And while I am not living paycheck to paycheck, I still care very much about this. Can you see? Can the competition say the same? Right?
Right.
If you were hiring me to rent, let's say your $60,000 a month townhouse, I could say, hey, barring any unforeseen accident where I can't make it here, even if I'm in a wheelchair, I will come show this apartment.
Right.
Right? This is a huge deal to me. I'm sure I'm number one, etc. But this is a huge deal to me, and I'm going to put everything I have into this. Right? Can the other person say that? No, of course. He'll get the listing. You'll never see him again. So
That's
you
great
don't tell them
advice.
that.
No, no, you're
You
you're
don't
right. You hit it right on
you
the
don't
nail.
tell them that. You say, "Okay, listen, you
Yeah.
want to sign with a huge, right? They're not even going to pay attention."
Yeah.
Listen, if Ryan Serhant or just an agent of that level has, let's just say, a $5 million listing, right?
Mhm.
To them, that's like a cup of coffee. They have
Right.
100 people who want them to sell or buy their $5 million listings, right?
Right.
So how much do they actually care? They're worried about the $25 million
Yeah.
listing. So they're going to put somebody else on it, and you say, "Hey, listen, while I do have an assistant, etc. Like
Mm.
I'm right here on this. You know what I
Right.
mean? I'm not passing this off." And you don't accuse him of passing it off, but I think people learn very quickly. Like, think about it. If you follow the guy
Yeah.
on social media, what does he show apartments? He shows that $80 million
Yeah.
penthouse, right? Of course,
True.
he shows that.
Yeah.
So you want to find a professional who knows what they're doing, yet at the same time, it's just like everything else about finding that balance, right? It's not an exact science.
Right. Well, good advice on that one. And you hit it right on the nail. That happens in Los Angeles too. A lot of these big agents that you think they're hiring them, but you're actually hiring their understudy, right? So great
Of
point on
course, you
that.
never see him again, right? It's as a bit. It
Yeah.
functions very well as a
Right.
business, right? Like his business model is, I'll show up to the listing pitch, I'll make some kick-ass video, and then you'll do all the showings, and I'll give you 25%. Like I'd love to run a business like that. I'm also like, how do you get away with it? Because all the people I work for are calling me at
Yeah.
7 a.m. going, "What's going on with this? What's going on with that?" Right? So
Yeah.
the other issue I'll tell you I've had with my business, and I've had this with multiple landlords I work for, is they go, "Okay, I have one assistant and one person that works with me and helps me if I can't be in 2 places at once." And all of them will say the same thing to me. They'll go, "Are you showing, or is someone else? Because you need to be showing. We want you showing." And it's like, oh, You know what I mean? So I'm wondering, actually, how do these other people get away with it? That's what I'm always wondering, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll
Well,
tell you, I worked for a huge broker.
right.
I'm not going to like put his name out there or anything. It's public record. But he's a huge. So he was number one at Element individual agents the last 4 or 5 years. He used to have a team.
Wow.
And my first day, I was already in the business, but I had met him at the country club and met his family. He said, "Hey, come work for me." I'd never been on a team. It did not work for me, and he's still super successful. And I stayed at Element. But my first day on the job, I mean, this guy was, I would say he's Ryan's level or above, right?
Right.
Sold, I watched him sell a $50 million apartment at the San Remo, right? The whole thing. And the first day he's like, hey, he like hands me the keys to a $9 million listing and is like, hey, I'm going to St. Bart's, let me know how it goes. And I'm like, okay, because to him it's peanuts to an elephant, right?
Yeah.
But when we would write that email update to the owner, it was, we showed, the bar was on 63 this weekend, and we, right? But it was
Right.
like he didn't even, right? So, and I actually got in trouble with him because the doorman only knew me.
Right.
So one day he went to show it, and he walks by the doorman, and this guy is like a huge deal in his own right, right? He sold 50
Right.
million, and the doorman's name was Alphonse. I'll never forget this because he told me after. He said he walks right by, and in these nicer buildings, there's a button under the doorman's desk where they allow the elevator to go up. So if somebody runs by them and hits like penthouse,
Yeah.
it won't do anything, right? So he comes out, he goes penthouse, and he goes, you have to wait for. And Alphonse says to him, you have to wait for the broker. And apparently he was super pissed because he's a huge deal. He's in front of his clients. He goes, I am the broker. Ooh.
Oh man.
Anyway, so how, Alphonse was like, bro, I've never seen the guy. He's like, in 6 months that this apartment's been shown, I haven't seen him once. How am
Wow.
I just supposed to know because he walks in here in a Brioni suit that he's the broker?
Oh man. That's heartbreak right
My
there.
my my tenure ended shortly after that with him. I don't think he was so happy.
I can imagine. Tough question here. I'm gonna throw you a curveball here. I know you're a big New York scene sports guy. Would you trade your career in for a Knicks championship?
No,
And do you think they'll ever win a championship?
I wouldn't. I would not. With James Dolan at the helm, I would not. I would not trade it in for a championship. Uh, I think that a New York Times article came out with him last week because I don't know if you know he's doing that globe in
Yeah.
Vegas, the Sphere, which actually looks. I will give him credit. Looks cool, but he said the reason people get kicked out when they chant "sell the team" or hold up a "sell the team" poster is because we have a policy on harassing employees, and I'm an employee and I don't want to be harassed. I mean, the guy is just so like, oh, I would not do it if Dolan was the owner. No.
Right. It's kind of like the same energy where Donald Sterling was the owner of the Clippers. Basically, a lot of people didn't, like the owner per se, but I think the Knicks, man, honestly, they just need a change of ownership. Like you said, if they had a different person at the helm, look, let's face it, you guys have a great squad this year. You guys have Villanova 2.0, basically, right?
At,
And
at the end of the day, it comes down to how much does the organization care. If you look at like what Steve Cohen's doing with the Mets, or you look at like Mark Cuban with the Mavericks, right?
right,
You need someone to come in who actually cares about winning, right? Are you looking at this? And it's just like real estate. It's like how much of this are you looking at as a business, and how much are you looking at it as something where you want to connect with people, right? Because the Jet Stadium's full, right? They got Zach
right,
Wilson out there; it's full. So how much does Woody Johnson care about them winning?
yeah,
Right. So who are the idiots? Us, because the Knicks are still full. The Knicks are still one of the most recognizable franchises.
right,
So I don't think Dolan feels motivated or incentivized. I think he's just a miserable guy who was
right.
handed the New York Knicks by his father. So
He's he's too busy singing.
yeah, JD and I mean just when you think about that though, like when Bruce Springsteen is at the Garden, Dolan says, okay, we're going to give you a discount, but I have to open.
Yeah, that's
Like
weird.
what? But look, people try and pay their way into situations all the time. And to quote Drake, if you ain't got it, you ain't got it. The theory is
Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, I remember Dan Bilzerian tried to pay his way into some movies. I don't think that ended well for him because
no,
he can't act, man.
you
You
can
can't
act.
act, right? You have to be rooted in reality, whether it's real estate, whether it's
Yep.
sports. I true stories, people in my hometown, man, that didn't go nearly as far as I did in tennis, and they were 15, 16 going, want to go pro. You
Yeah.
want to go pro. You know by like 13 if you're going pro. I mean, Nadal was winning French Opens at 17. Boris Becker,
Yeah.
Pete Sampras, they're winning. You know you're not going pro. You got to be rooted in
Yeah.
reality and say, okay, this is realistically how far I can take it,
Yep.
right? You are probably not the anomaly, right? I know it's a horrible thing to say. You're probably not the outlier,
Right.
right? But if you work really hard, let's see what happens.
I agree, man. But I think going back to Dolan, I think that it ended with me when he kicked Oakley out the state. Well, out of
Listen,
MSG, basically.
I have Charles Oakley's autograph on a deli brown paper bag somewhere. I was obsessed with the Knicks when I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
Obsessed, right? I met Allen Houston, changed my life, and he was trying to recruit me into his church. But he signed a WWJD wristband. He was really nice guy, and that team. I mean, that like I would cry when they lost. Like LJ hit the 4-point play on my birthday.
Man,
You know, throwing up
that's
the power
probably
rail like we're
that is the
yeah,
best
man,
Nick team I would say ever, in my opinion.
sure.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people will go back to like Dave DeBuscher and what's his name, Walt Clyde Frazier,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, it's as it's tough, right? I think one thing, two great things about just sports in general is one, regardless of what people want to say, it brings people together,
Yeah.
right? It brings people together, and two, and I think Bill Maher made this point recently. Not that I'm necessarily a huge fan of his. It's still the only thing right now, present day, where unless you're the best, you're not out there. Nobody's getting a free ride because of who their dad was or any sort of special like for example, Jordan's kid didn't play in the NBA. Like
Uh-huh.
LeBron's kid isn't guaranteed to play in the NBA. There is no nepotism. There is no favoritism.
Mhm.
It's just like if you are the best, you are out there. It is still probably at this point in our society the only performance based thing,
Right.
right? And I think that's why people enjoy watching it because at the end of the day, Andre Agassi's kid, he's a great baseball pitcher, but he's not like given a chance at
Nope.
tennis. Well, your dad was good. Here's a wild card into the U.S. Open, right? Or
Right.
whatever it is. And I think that's the one reason that. But basketball needs. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It needs some sort of overhaul because to hear the ratings and everything, it's tough because we grew up in a different era. But to hear that a week 3 football game between two mediocre NFL teams blows out like the NBA Finals
Yeah.
ratings wise, it's like, okay, what's going on?
I,
And
yeah.
as we get older, are we just not recognizing great moments until they pass? Because now I'm looking back at 2015, 2016, going, man, that was the best of times. That rivalry
Yeah.
between LeBron and Curry, it's like, man, I'd kill to have that back. Maybe I
Right.
should have appreciated it more in the moment.
And we didn't because we kept seeing it over and over again, right? They made memes about it where LeBron was like 80 years old. They're going at it again.
Yeah,
I think we just got, kind of spoiled of that greatness.
we were spoiled, but you know what, I think the takeaway from that just in general is just like appreciate the moment.
Yeah.
When you first start in real estate, it's 80% of the people who get their license in New York don't renew it after the first 2 years.
Wow.
So
That's
you have to enjoy failure. You have to
right.
enjoy pain. Um, but anyone who's successful at anything, I think if you looked at it and they were evaluated by a mental health professional, they'd say this person's disordered
Right.
because look at I mean, look at Kobe, look at
Yeah.
Tom Brady. Not that I ever compare myself to this, but look at any of these people. They lived disordered lifestyles.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was no healthy balance.
Right.
But the difference between them and real estate is real estate you could do till you're 85 years old. There's a woman in my office who's 82 who just sold a $40 million home. I was like, damn, just retire, give us a chance, right? So
God bless her.
yeah, man, what do you need the money for? No, so that's the difference where it's like, okay, right, these athletes, right, no matter how well you prepare, no matter how hard you train, you have a lifespan, right? And they
Right.
get to live the rest of their lives. But with us, the hardest thing to do is to sort of pace yourself.
Man, great advice, man. Great outlook on the
I don't
Knicks.
do it, by the way. I don't pace. I'm just being honest with you. I
Yeah.
don't pace. I do not pace myself. I'm just like,
Yeah.
whatever's in front of me, I gotta go get it, right? And at what point do you, which, everything in life is a double-edged sword. There's positives and negatives, everything. So my mindset has got me to where I am, right? We did 300 something rentals last year, but at the same time, it's like, can that sustain it? My answer to you is no. I couldn't be
Yeah.
42 running around, right? Like today was raining in New York. And if I looked at my phone right now on a slow
Yeah.
day or my watch, I'll tell you I took 15,000 steps, right? On a
Wow.
slow day. Like I'm running around. You can't do it. It's not sustainable. So what's the answer? Bigger deals, but do those come? Who knows, right? So
Yeah.
you take it day by day. And if you look at the people who really succeeded in our industry, it's not the people you see on TV. The
Right.
people who succeeded, the people on TV who succeeded because they were on TV, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
I think
It's
that's what the effed up part is. It these kids, especially, like you hit the number right now, right? People, some of the agents don't renew their license in NYC. In California, just in my region alone, 1,000 agents just dropped off in the last month. So that should
okay.
tell you something, right? It's not, it's a contact sport, just like football. Like you got to grind. If you don't grind, you ain't gonna shine. So
Sure. And everyone thinks they can do it.
yeah,
Everyone thinks they can do it. And I get that and I understand it. And it, I think that especially with sales, with interest rates going, a lot of people will
yeah,
drop out. But that's sort of how you weed out the. I hate to say this, the weak ones, right? And
yeah,
it's not weak. Let me not use the word weak, right? Some things just aren't suited for certain people,
yeah,
right? People say, "Well, how are you successful?" So, well, okay. Do you like your weekends? Yeah. Okay. Well, then you can't, right? Because I'm working when everybody else isn't. So tomorrow, people are like, "Hey, I don't get out of work till 5:15. Can I come see that at 6?" It's like, so how long is my day, right? My day is
yeah,
essentially 9 to 7 tomorrow, right? Nobody's like, oh, I'll come at noon on your time, right?
yeah,
Unless you have the most amazing. So that's the thing is people want to see things before work and after work. So your day is elongated. So
yeah,
I'm gonna show tomorrow till about 6:30, right? It's apartment on Christopher Street, and I might have nothing to show for it.
yeah,
It's hard. And my people always come to, well, how do you do this and how do you do that? I go, look, if you're not willing to do certain things, you're not going to get to this level. So I had to sacrifice, relationships, free time, all these things with no guaranteed outcome. And I think that's the
yeah,
hardest part for people who are getting into real estate or people who are in real estate going, so I could do all this work and
yeah,
have nothing to show for it. I don't like it. Right? I don't like
yeah,
it either. I don't like it either, but I am
yeah.
addicted to it.
Same here. Same here, brother. How can they find you? If they're watching this podcast, how can they find you on social media?
So it's just at not Keyan, Notkeyan. So at not Keyan.
And your avatar is you're wearing a Latrell Sprewell jersey, if I'm not mistaken.
Because I want to choke out the competition. No, I apologize to PJ Carlissimo and his family for that instance. I think enough time has passed, right?
Yeah, he works.
Yeah,
He
man.
works for the Knicks now. In fact, Sprewell
PJ
does.
Carlissimo works for the.
Yeah,
Springwell does.
for public
I've
relations or
been.
something like that.
That's actually really funny, right? And I
Yep.
think the lesson. I think listen, there's a lesson in everything. The lesson there is time heals all.
Right.
Because by the way, he also chased a teammate with a 2x4 when he was on Golden State. This is on record. He chased him with a fucking wooden 2x4 around the locker room in the parking lot or something.
Yeah.
But
So
but yeah, I think there's so many parallels between hip hop, sports, and sales, right?
yeah,
So
definitely. All right, brother. It was a pleasure, guys. That is my man
yeah,
from
absolutely. Thank
NYC.
you.
And if you want to find him, he's on Instagram, and you can find this episode on YouTube and on Spotify, guys. It's a wrap.
Thanks, man.